Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
I'm still here.
Oh, we're good. We're all still here. We met.
Poor Heather.
I'm so sorry.
Offers to do this.
I know. And then I was like,
The first
goodbye.
thing Chelsea does is kicks her
Totally
out.
fine. It's totally fine.
We
Yeah.
got 5 minutes of just back and forth catch up, and now you're done. It was
Yep.
easy.
It was a very short podcast. No, apologies. We don't usually so we have a guest on the pod this week, and hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're recording with software we don't use a whole lot. So we might encounter a glitch here or two, so thanks for bearing with us. But we have a guest this week. Katie, would you like to set up an introduction?
So we have on the pod this episode Heather Pasquinelli, who we have kind of a weird connection, Heather. We go way back to a point where it didn't seem like we would, because I got placed to do hours in college in Heather's class, and we immediately bonded because she's a Dave Matthews fan and I am a Dave Matthews fan. And so just kind of happened by chance, but has been a really great connection, and I've loved keeping up with her. And we've been trying to find a way to talk. So it was a great chance to just finally get to talk to Heather. And we share our love of the Holocaust education.
We're both
So
teacher fellows.
Yeah, we got a bunch of connections. So it's really nice to have you, Heather. And I'm just happy to see you. It's been so long. So this is
I'm
cool.
happy to see you too off of Facebook. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And not just exchanging information about Dave and Coldplay. So
Yeah, of course. I think one of these summers we'll finally get it together and we'll get to one. So
you got to come to the Gorge.
I know, that's so high on my
We
list.
do want to go there. It's one
Yep.
of the places for
We
sure.
decided 2 years ago, and then COVID happened, that we were going to do it every year.
Oh.
So that's our new thing as old people. We
Has he
travel
been
to
back?
the Gorge. We went, the last 2 years we've gone
So,
again.
okay.
So yeah.
How far is that for you? You don't have to tell us everything details, I
gosh.
guess, but
I don't ever drive anywhere. So I think it's like 16 hours, something
okay.
like that.
So you fly out.
No, we drive.
You make your husband drive?
My husband drives. I sleep.
There you go.
Yeah,
Atta
this
baby.
year we brought the camper because we were doing it in a tent and in the back of our van before,
Oh, golly.
and that's quite miserable. So
That would be
we
so
did
much
the camper
fun.
this year, and it was much more pleasant
That is so cool.
because it's
That sounds
1,000
awesome.
degrees there every
Yeah.
year. So yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's
But
high on
worth
my
it.
list.
well worth it.
We're gonna have to figure out how to do that experience. I think we'd have fun with that too.
Oh, that's so cool.
Have you ever been there? Period, like to the Gorge at
No.
all? Oh my gosh. Okay, you have
Red
to.
Rocks.
Yeah, we started
See,
talking
I've
about
never
it
been
after
to
Red
Red
Rocks.
and it's
You
right beside
haven't?
me.
Ooh.
Nope. I tried to go see Rainbow Kitten Surprise, well, because that's who I love.
That's who
But
we
they are
love.
freaking sold out every time. So
They also canceled part of their tour this year.
Yes, I heard that. But yeah, we were trying, but everything was resale, and then the prices were ridiculous. So
Oh,
yeah,
man.
no, we love them too. We went and saw them at
Okay.
Innings Fest a couple years ago.
Next summer, let's do Rainbow Kitten, and we'll meet you at Red Rocks, and we can do like
Yes.
both nights or whatever. That would be
Let's do it.
so much fun.
Yes,
Okay.
I love them. Okay.
This is the real reason for the podcast, everyone. We've shifted away from education. We're talking about the things that bring educators joy.
Hey, that's fair
And that
game.
is music.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
spending all of our money on traveling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Packing
Okay.
everything you can into a summer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You almost get it down to the day when you're trying to get everything you want to get in during those vacation hours.
Yep.
We've
I'm already thinking about it now. I'm going to start planning our
We're
trip.
planning our
See
vacation.
how yeah, that's it.
There is no good music that's going to happen in Wyoming unless you're into country music. So that is why I travel out of state for
Okay.
concerts. So
Sure.
yeah.
All right.
Well, we'll start our vacation planning right after this call. If you wouldn't mind, just give us, your elevator pitch, the version of you, your spiel, who you are, what the general idea of your work, how you got here. We just want to set it up for everyone listening.
Okay. In a nutshell. So I've been teaching for 18 years for high school and above. I was a early childhood educator before that. And I was in Ohio for 7.5 years. Ohio had these like ridiculous amount of teacher cuts, and I got cut from my school that I thought I would retire from. And when that happened, my husband said, well, you always wanted to go to Montana. Let's go to Montana. And I'd actually always wanted to teach on a reservation. That was something that I wanted to do. And we decided to do that and found out that Montana pays even less than Ohio does.
Yeah.
And yeah, like badly. It's really bad. And so we kept seeing advertisements for Wyoming teachers. They made about $20,000 more a year. And so we ended up there. So, but I didn't start on a reservation here. I started at a regular public school. I taught for 3 years in that district, 2 years in another district that had a like 30% Native population, and then went to actually teach on the reservation. I've been on the reservation for 8 years now. So in different schools, but that's really common when you teach on the reservation. You kind of bounce around to different schools sometimes. So there's a lot of politics involved with teaching on the reservation.
For sure.
And things like that. So yeah, so I'm here. And then I'm also a foster mom, an adoptive mom. So I have 3 biological children, 2 children adopted from West Africa. And then my other 5 children are Native American from this reservation. And 3 of them are adopted, which is, we are the first white couple to adopt from that tribe.
Are you really?
So, yeah, we are the first and only who have adopted from the Eastern Shoshone tribe. 3-year process, and that has different political connotations with people too. So
sure,
but we had full permission of the parents, and they fought with us to get custody of those 3 children. So yeah, so we are not only like teachers here, we are invested with our children. We want our children to be part of this community as well, and as much as they can from us as parents to learn their culture and those values and those types of things. So it's important for us to be here.
I didn't realize that you were the first couple to do that. That is,
it was hard. It was a rough road. And, like I said, some people are in agreement with it. Some people are not. I understand, the circumstances around it, but for our family, it was important to us to not lose custody of those kids. And it was important to their parents as well. And so, so they fought with us, and now they're just ours. And we still have an open relationship with those parents, but with some of the reasons we'll talk about later, I'm sure, is with addiction and other issues that sometimes not consistent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is such a different world from coming from Southeastern Ohio to there. That is just.
It is. Yeah. And, I grew up there too. So I was just little Appalachian girl. So I didn't see a lot of diversity growing up. I didn't, I came from that area. My family's been from Southeastern Ohio forever, So yeah, it's very different from everybody in my family. But I'm also the first person in my family to graduate from college. So there's that. That makes a difference in your worlds.
Wow. It for sure can.
But I tell my students all the time, education changes your life. And I really, really mean that. So yeah.
So I guess how did you become interested in teaching on a reservation? Where did that come from for you, do you think?
That really came, this is ridiculous. It's going to be a ridiculous reason. It came from my mother, who, it's embarrassing to talk about this, but my mother, she never worked outside of our home or anything like that. And she watched Little House on the Prairie. And she was just always like, that's where you should go teach, Heather. You should go out there and teach kids like that. They really need good teachers. So before I was a teacher, and I really think it all had to do with my mother's perception of what beautiful men looked like. And to her, that was Native American men. So really, she was probably just trying to find me a husband or something and didn't realize how it worked. But yeah, that's really where it started. So when I was little, I was super interested in that. And I was super interested. That was the one good thing my mom really always did for me, was even though we didn't have diversity in our lives, she was interested in introducing me to differences in people. And so I always tell my students and stuff, my mom never bought me white baby dolls. My baby dolls were always Black baby dolls or Asian baby dolls or anything that she could find that was different. And that's really, I think, what started that with me, is being interested in people who weren't like me and who didn't look like me. And I guess that's where it began, which is weird. But as I grew and as I taught, even at Buckeye Trail, I had a couple of Native American students and talked to, like, I worked with a lady there who had grown up on a reservation and talked to her and stuff. So when I was coming out here, when we made that decision, I talked a lot to them, and it was just, I don't know why. It was just, I was interested in it. And I grew up, you know, the reservations are really impoverished. And even though I'm not Native, I grew up very poor. And so I could relate to that. Like, I can relate to that. And I have a much harder time relating in public schools out here with kids who like grew up in ranches all their lives and those types of things. I don't have that connection with them, but I have struggled. And so I felt like I had something to offer those kids because I could see that struggle too. Like, I grew up like a lot of them, not nearly as rough sometimes as some of my kids have it, but I definitely get their struggle.
So was it hard to, I'm not sure how the interview process would work. Was it difficult as a non-Native person to, is that an appropriate term?
Yeah, actually, I would say, like, more than tribal, we say just Native. We say Native a lot, which to me, again, so there's something else. When I came out here, I was like, stop saying that. Stop saying Native. It sounded like you shouldn't say that. Like, that felt disrespectful to me. And they're like, Miss P, we are Native. You know, I was like, okay. Like, if you're all right.
I wanted to be accurate.
Understand. I really didn't understand any of the social constraints of it or like what was politically correct. I taught at Buckeye Trail, and now, like, the things that I know that we did at Buckeye Trail, as far as like for spirit, and like even my little like Teacher of the Year award back here with the warrior head on it is like super wrong, like things you shouldn't do. But that has opened a good discussion with my kids here on the reservation, which is, it really isn't always people being racist. It really is ignorance sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I've told them that. I was like, because they'll go, oh, you know, these white people, but not you, Miss P. And I'm like, listen, I was those white people too. Like, I was as ignorant as a lot of other people. I did not know that this was offensive or what to say. So yeah, we say Native American. And when we talk amongst ourselves, we say Native. I even have students and families who say Indian. That's not something that I'm comfortable using. But I mean, I've taught in 2 schools that have Indian in the name. I taught at Wyoming Indian and St. Stephen's Indian schools. So it's a weird thing because you're not.
It is.
You probably shouldn't use that. So.
And they've just
but it's in the title. So yeah. But no, I don't know. There's a lot of white teachers out here, so it isn't as uncommon as you would think, because it's very, very hard to find Native teachers on the reservation to teach here. You know, they have what is it, like, oh my gosh, I wrote down somewhere. Is it like a 13% college graduation rate, which is much, much lower than other places in the country. So just to find certified teachers is hard on the reservations, period. So a lot of times they're recruits from off-res.
Yeah, I was looking at similar statistics to try to prepare a little bit today, because I think Kate and I are both probably out of our comfort zones with some of this stuff. Like you were saying, Southeastern Ohio is not a place where you get to be in touch with a whole lot of this on a regular basis.
No.
So, yeah.
Well, and the Native American side of it is very different, because, you know, I've talked to my students about that. Like, what we learn about Native American history in school is almost like they don't exist anymore. You know, I never thought about when I was growing up, and I grew up in Tuscarawas, which is a Native American name, right? Like that community, everything around us was named for Native Americans. I used to go out in my field and pick through the dirt for arrowheads and had jars and jars of arrowheads, and never thought about what happened to the people that lived there. Like that, I learned the history of them, but not the history of what was done to them. Mm-hmm. Other than, you know, your one paragraph on the Trail of Tears that you got in social studies. So yeah, that I had a very abstract view of what it was to be Native American. And I know like my students in Buckeye Trail, when I was coming out here, I mean, the question, and my students and we always talk about their questions for people that don't understand Native American reservations or communities are, do they still live in teepees? And that's always, it's such a weird thing. And you're like, no, guys, like, no, like that's not a thing. But that's, and all the kids say that too, that that's what kids will ask them if they come from outside of communities or whatever. And again, that's not discrimination. That's just ignorance sometimes,
Yeah,
like of
absolutely.
knowing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been lucky to be able to travel through parts of the West and Southwest, and so I feel like even just getting out of state, it's a challenge for a lot of kids here. so so
Mm-hmm.
again, there's just there are a lot of opportunities to be ignorant. So just because, I mean, that's a weird way to say it, but it's really difficult for people to expand the boundaries of their worlds sometimes,
If they
particularly
never
when,
travel.
yeah, if your parents can't or don't for whatever reason, take you places. It's some of the questions that I've heard students ask. The naivety of them can be almost charming sometimes, but you can just tell that it's just from a total lack of exposure to anything different from them.
Yeah,
So
no, definitely. My
yeah,
my mother will say things and I'm like, oh, cringy, cringy,
yeah,
cringy.
yeah.
It's not
Mhm.
like, it's always that. Uh-oh, let's filter mom before
Yeah.
she came in. I'm not gonna let her listen to this podcast. So like she came to visit and like she was grandma in the corner and I'm like, please, mom, please don't say anything. Please just watch what you say. So yeah, because but I talk to our students all the time. Actually, I'm just starting a program now for ambassadors for girls, because we have such a problem on the reservation with the missing and murdered Indigenous women and violence in dating relationships, and those types of things. So I started an ambassadors program that's going to start here in the next couple weeks for girls. And that's one of the components is I put in for the grant money to help them travel so that we can take them
Wow.
places to expose them to some things that they'll never get to see. I wish I could do it for everyone here. I wish all the kids would get to travel off reservation. And I don't mean just to leave the reservation, but to bring things back.
Mhm.
When I was at the other school, we had a similar program and the kids traveled to France.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
So I'm really, really hoping that we can do that in this school as well, because I just think that opens so many doors and opens their eyes to the possibilities that they have. Because I think it's really hard for the kids who haven't been exposed to anything outside of just the reservation to picture themselves doing big things sometimes.
Yeah.
My kids, I'll ask them like, and also because of how life is here, it's really hard for them to think about their futures, period. Like if they have futures or, what will happen to them. So I think travel's good for that it gives them an incentive to want to do something.
I think my question is basically, and talking about Ruby Payne, I don't know if you're familiar with Ruby Payne, but like the cycles of poverty, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How communities become trapped. I don't know if there's a better word, but is that part of what your students face as far as leaving, not leaving? Like, would you
Most
say that
definitely.
most of them plan to stay and live? Like, what are kind of you know what I mean?
I
Their
think
trajectories.
I think one of the things that we see is even the students who decide to leave, and my friends that I know who have left the reservation, who have gotten an education and come back, is a lot of the times they are not accepted by their own people because there's that stigma of, well, you think you're better than me or whatever. And that's not always the case, but it is a big case. And I think that's very intimidating for kids to think that if they go away and they do well for themselves, that that's going to be perceived as something else, or that it's colonization, right? That if you go and you go out into the white man's world with the colonizers, that you will become like them. So that's the struggle I think a lot of the kids have. And then also it really is when you have that intergenerational trauma, that historical trauma of the things that have happened to them, a lot of them are scared of what will happen for their children. And even if they don't overtly transmit that to the kids feel it. And so there's that fear, in association with that too, because for years kids were pulled off of the reservation with horrible consequences, with the boarding schools and all of that stuff that's been recently. in the news and those types of things. But yeah, I think it's hard for kids to leave. I think it's hard to break codependent relationships a lot of the time that they have. A lot of them are entrenched in addiction, in homes full of addiction. That's not a secret. There's a lot of addiction, there's a lot of alcoholism, and there's a lot of kids here. I mean, the majority of my students are not raised by their biological parents. They are raised by family members, or they are in foster care. And so there's guilt that goes along with that. When you have your elderly grandparents taking care of you, you do not want to grow up and move away and abandon them right after they've taken care of you.
Because they did that for you, so you
they
feel
did
you
that
owe
for
it.
you. And even without, like, you know, that's not saying that they're getting a guilt trip or anything, but that would be inside of you to like not want to abandon those people. But truly, it is really, really hard just to get kids to graduate, let alone get to college. You know, it is very difficult to keep kids in school here. It is very difficult that even when you have them in school, to get them to achieve sometimes, because, and that was something that I had no understanding of. No understanding. Even coming from poverty, I had no understanding of, I just felt like I'm a really good teacher. I can raise grades wherever I go. I will make them proficient. Everybody will read when we are done. Like, right?
Yeah.
That was my thing, because that had been my experience in the past. Like teaching, even in Southeastern Ohio, teaching those kids. I was just like, they did well for me because I had relationships with them. You know, all of those things that were important to me, and getting them to connect. And so my kids did well. Like I taught AP for 7 years. Well, actually 9 years. When I came out here, I taught AP as well. Definitely a difference in the caliber of my students.
Sure.
But, you know, I had, like, the 1 year, I think I had 5 out of 6 kids pass the AP exam. So I was used to driven kids.
Yeah.
And here, it's so different, because we are definitely living Maslow. Like that's what we live. And I didn't realize how difficult it is for kids if they don't sleep the night before and they don't eat and they are dealing with conflict in their homes. How do you come to school and care about anything?
And why would you care?
And even if you do care, you can't sustain that, right? Because you're going home every day to that same thing. And, you know, we have, I think the statistics here, I went to a training 1 year for Indigenous women, and I think it was like in the 90% of girls by the time they reach the age of 15 that have had some type of sexual abuse happen to them. And so, like, why do you care about school if that's what you're living, right? Like, why? How do you get past that when that's not something that's talked about and you don't receive counseling for it? Because, you know, that's not something that's easily accessible on the reservation either, is quality mental health services, and for the amount of population that they have to work with, you know, like school counselors, and everyone can only do so much. So yeah, that's been a difficult thing for me, shifting production, because I came from, you know, public school is definitely production and standardized testing, to coming to a place where they're like, don't worry about your test scores. I'm like, what?
Can't imagine.
Sorry, and yeah, it's
you hired me to teach, right? Like,
and feeling like I'm failing students when I don't, right? Like that's been a personal thing for me, to try to let go of that. And my son, so my husband teaches in the same school that I teach in, and so does my son. So we are all here, and there's 6 teachers in the entire building, and we are 3 of them. So we're in this
didn't
little
realize
tiny,
that the population
yes,
was
the
okay.
school that I work with now is brand new as a high school, and we have capped at 45 students, but generally we get like 30 or 35 a day. And yeah, and so we're 3 of those teachers. My husband's a SPED teacher, and my son's a social studies teacher, who has an anthropology degree and is now getting his master's in education. So
that is
like
so
Chelsea,
cool.
yes, took a different path than what he thought, in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt really weird about, like, I wanted kids to do well academically. That's what I'd always kind of judged myself on too. And now my teaching centers around, what can I do in this 40 minutes that I have them? How can I make them feel loved and respected? How do I make them feel safe? And a lot of the times, that is, I'm putting out fires of whatever has happened the night before, whatever is on their mind, and what home. My kids are transient a lot of the time. My kids are going to a new foster home, to a new grandparent. Death is constant on the reservation. There is suicide. There are family ailments after COVID. So many of our students lost family members. And so my role has changed. So we read, and I try to find things that they connect with in our reading. But we also take a really long time to do that so that we can stop and talk about the things that they need to talk about.
Yeah.
And I try to set up my classroom, which that's always been important to me. My room is always important to me because I want kids to come in and like where they're at. But even more so out here, I always have food. I'm like a donors choose hoe. I'm just on there all the time trying to get money. So
Chelsea, I wish you could have seen this classroom when I walked in for those observation hours when I was in college, because it was like, I remember you had one of those signs on the wall that was like, hippies use the back door.
Yeah.
I was like, this
now
I
hangs
like.
at my house. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So like that was like the thing that greeted me, and I was like, I like her. I know nothing, but I like her. And there was like pink. I feel like there was like a boa.
It's so
like
pink
there
now.
was like,
If you could just see, well, you can probably see behind me now.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like over the top this year because I have this like beautiful room. Donors Choose to help me create a library for my students.
That's so great.
I always make sure I have blankets and places for them to sleep because a lot of my kids don't sleep. And sometimes that means they come in and I say, all right, you're not staying awake. You either need to go to the stand-up desk because I have stand-up desks for them, or if you cannot do that, go lay down. But tomorrow you don't get that pass.
Yeah.
So like that's how we negotiate. I always have food in here. I'm really excited because I just got a donors choose for that girls project, that ambassadors project. And then another one, a $4,000 one, which is the biggest one I've ever had, to do a Healthy Minds community mental health carnival.
Oh, cool.
That my kids are going to put on because Bring Change to Mind. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Huh.
Glenn Close, the actress Glenn Close, started it for mental health services to get rid of the stigma. And we're the first high school in Wyoming to have a chapter.
No way.
Wow.
So we're really excited about that. We're actually like just now recruiting members, and they're going to put this on because I feel so strongly about our kids needing healthy minds. Like they really need some resources and some help. Because like I said, suicide is a huge thing out here. But yeah, I went off on a tangent and I don't remember.
No, no, it's really interesting to hear.
I love to hear. I just want to hear about it. I mean, that's,
I want to talk some more about the sort of two systems. Well, maybe you've worked in more, but two big systems of education that you've worked within. I would love to hear just the kind of meta-analysis of both of those worlds. I mean, you're talking about some of how realities in the classroom are so different. I'd love to hear more, even, just generally differences or tensions even between those two worlds, or the way that we talk about those two worlds, and just how those lived experiences are so different for you.
Well, so my teaching started at Buckeye Trail in southeastern Ohio, and my principal, who has since retired, and he was like, oh, super military guy, everything rules, and he made me crazy, and I loved him. Because I am not one of those people. Like, I am just like, I do what I like and I'm a hippie. And, but I am so glad that I learned from him because he taught me such great discipline. And I tell him this to this day. Like when I left there, when I lost my job, he was incredibly sad that I had gotten cut because he hired me. And so we had worked together 7.5 years and had great respect for each other. And I said, how am I going to go somewhere else? Like, I love my kids and this is my family and I love everybody here. And he's like, Heather, kids are going to love you wherever you go. You're still going to be you. And then I came out to Wyoming and found out that wasn't true. And so I sent him emails and I was like, you lied to me.
Let me tell you, mister.
I was like, they don't like hippies in Wyoming, just so you know.
Correction to the previous idea.
I chose a very non-hippie place.
But I was very spoiled in what it was to be an educator in the regular box, in the regular realm of what teaching is, right? So I came to school, I was time on task, bell to bell. This is what we do. We facilitate conversations, but there is learning happening in here, right? Like all the time. And my scores were good and everything was good. So I had nothing to worry about because I was protected and supported and all of those things. I had no idea that there was any other kind of realm. So when I came to Wyoming, I taught in a school district where the principal was Wyoming Principal of the Year. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I'm going to this school and it's going to be great. And I was like, oh, this is not what I learned. This is not how I learned. And so I've greatly adapted, not just within the reservation life, but just schools in Wyoming. And after several years of teaching in public schools in Wyoming, I decided it's not for me because I like kids and I like relationships with kids. I like to get to know them. And I have this weird thing about respect. So as a woman in Wyoming, that was really a difficult thing. And on the reservation, I don't feel that conflict as much. Like I said, in Ohio, I felt respected. And, you know, you always have as a woman, right? Like just as a woman thing, there's always going to be people that don't. I guess as a person, you're always going to have that. But definitely felt myself supplanted into a male dominated world. And I was not used to that. So coming to the reservation, whereas, like I said, coming from that box of this is what education is, kids will achieve, this is how we measure our success, which is by whatever standardized test is at that time. And for me was AP, right? And then coming here, so like off reservation, even in Wyoming, Wyoming's worlds behind where we were in Ohio. And even when I was in Ohio, I didn't even think of us as exceptional.
No.
But now I do.
Okay.
So because there was such a huge difference in the academic levels of my kids.
Really?
Yeah, very, very much so. Well, when I came out here, so I was hired to teach high school here, not on the reservation. So this is just in regular public school. I was hired to teach high school and AP. They didn't have an AP program. So like, oh, good, you can teach AP here. Okay, cool. I'll teach AP here. And then I get there and I'm like, everybody takes the same English? Yeah. You have any honors English? No. But seniors will take AP. Oh, no. AP is a whole different world. I'm like, that's a college course. So in Buckeye Trail, I had, like a maximum of 8 kids out of 120 that made it to AP. Here, I had 20 students and then 16 of them were in AP. And then I was expected that they would all pass the AP exam. And that was my measure as a teacher. And I was like, it doesn't work that way, guys. You have to have some kind of background. I can't teach all 4 years of AP in one school year, but there was no understanding of it. And that's kind of been my thing everywhere I've gone. We'll call it a certain thing, but it's not that thing.
Sure.
And my kids were definitely not ready for that. And then, of course, I was a bad teacher because I couldn't make all 17 kids. Actually, I couldn't make one of them pass. Not one of them pass the AP exam.
That is not on you. That is
no.
Not on
and
you
I was just like, finally, I was like, listen, we're just going to read like we read in college. And that's what we're going to do. And I quit trying to teach for a test because they needed to get something out of it, but it just wasn't going to be that. They were not going to pass that exam. So then just coming to the reservation, like I said, it's just a very different, it feels very much so more holistic. And everyone that I work with, I think I haven't met many people that teach in a reservation school that don't feel that way. I was, I was led to believe, everyone said when I was leaving regular public education to come to the reservation, like, what are you doing? That's where the teachers go who can't find jobs anywhere else. And I was like, really? Like, that's where I want to go. And what I found is that's such a misconception, because the people that are here that teach with me are so dedicated to these kids. We love these kids and we know what they come from and we are here for them. And that's why I became a teacher, like that kind of thing. And so we look at the kids all the time. We are always talking about, oh, so and so had this happen. Keep an eye on this kid. Or, hey, this is really good news. Somebody, we celebrate their successes because they're huge. And yeah, it's really very much a family with the kids here. And even when I move, school to school on the reservation, it's still the same community of kids. So all my kids know each other, or they're related to each other, or they're cousins, because everybody here is a cousin. So we always tell our son, like, when he starts dating, he's going to have to take applications because everyone's his cousin. So we're like, we have to, like, we're like, okay, you're going to have to sit down with us and we're going to have to determine who you can and cannot date.
We're going to need to think about this a little bit.
And our students, and our students joke about that all the time too, because that's their big joke, is like, and then I found out he was my cousin. So, but yeah, so it's really nice. I also know my place. I know that although I am part of these students' lives, I am not part of this community. So I am here, I work here, I love these kids, but I don't have ownership in this outside of the school. And I try to watch my boundaries. So that was the really hard thing when we adopted our kids, because I was crossing a boundary socially here. And some people were very, very supportive of that, and some people were very much not. And so that was a hard thing for us as a family too, to break ties with. I mean, we had people who broke ties with us because of that choice. But I stand by it. But yeah, so that's just really the difference is I felt like public education, and I still feel like it. I could not go back to work in a regular school again. I couldn't teach off reservation, I don't think, ever again, because it's a factory.
Yeah.
I feel like education has become a factory, and we produce, and our kids aren't getting any smarter. They're just losing touch with the things that make them human. And I don't like that. So I really truly, like, when we talk about, like, if we would ever move someday or something, I'm like, well, if I'm not retiring, we have to go somewhere where there's a reservation, because I would have to be in a tribal school to be able to do that. So yeah. But some people,
so different.
Yeah, but some people super like that, right? Like, they like the factory. They like teaching in that way. I haven't met a lot of them, but there are people that are like, this is how it is. Like, I've met plenty of admin that's that way, right? Like, this is how it should be. And they wouldn't be able to survive here.
No.
I think it can become easy to think that you're doing well at education when you're playing the game that has been set up for you very well. And I mean, I'm guilty of this too in my own professional life, but sometimes you think you're doing well because you're playing the hand that was dealt you very well, and other people recognize you for that, and you might get, professional recognition, whatever it is. But I think that can be, you can stifle your own learning if you fall into that too much, because there are things beyond what are being dealt to you, and there are systems that look very different from the one in which you might excel. So I'm sure that's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about, like, I guess with having the good principal that I had that first year, or those first few years, I was just thinking I was great. I'm an awesome teacher. I can do this. I keep these kids in line. They know, I mean, I rarely had to, like, contact the principal to, like, help me with discipline. So, and again, like, yeah, I won teacher of the year. Like, I did all these things, but really I had a good backbone behind me that I didn't think about, like, until I came out here, and I was like, oh, I don't have Tim standing behind me anymore. So I have to do
totally
this on my own, right? Yeah. And it did change things for me. I mean, I still, obviously, I think I'm a good teacher, but I was set up for success. Like you're saying, I had this framework of, this is how I thrive, but that's not always the case. Yeah.
I want to circle back and kind of hit on something you were talking about earlier. You said you have run a couple. Is it Donors Choose? Is that what you said?
Yes.
The tool. So we like to have we have a little tagline on the show, and that's, hey, maybe we should stop defunding education. I'd love to talk a little bit about how funding works in your school system.
This is the worst question for me.
Oh.
No, it's fine.
But
it's one
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
At. No, it's okay. I was actually like walking around asking everyone because every school is different. So,
well, that's an interesting answer too, because dealing with it in a one-off basis is also its own challenge.
So previously, before this school year, when we started this new school, I worked for a BIE school. So we are funded through the Bureau of Indian Education, that school. So that made sense, right? That's where your funding came from. That was it. They had different ways of being able to decide things like blood quantum. So it wasn't necessarily a public school where a white kid could go. Blood quantum's a big hot topic, like out here with colonization. And
I've never heard that before.
Oh, really? Okay.
Never.
So my children that are adopted have certificates that say their percentage of Native American blood for their tribal thing. So that is a big controversial thing on the reservation because, again, that's a condition that we've put on them as far as you have to prove that you are Native American to claim the benefits that our government gives you, etc. So the BIE school, and now the BIE has completely taken over it because of a ridiculousness that happened at my other school. And the students who enter that school now have to have their blood quantum certificates presented to the school to be allowed to attend. Yeah. And sadly, like one of my students from there was going to be a senior this year, but she is not enrolled as a tribal member. She lives on the reservation. She is partially Native American, but because she didn't go get enrolled, she was denied. And so she's here now with me. Not that I'm upset about that,
right.
But I am upset for her to not be able to graduate with the kids that she went to school with before. So there's BIE. I work in a public school. So we are state and I believe somewhat federally funded, but I am considered a public school. Oh. So, but what I think that means is that they would have to be within the school district to enroll. And we don't have white people living here on the reservation. So everyone who goes to my school is Native American. Mm-hmm. So it's 100% Native American population. 100% free and reduced lunches. So nobody pays for lunch here, which is good, or breakfast or whatever. So that was one of the biggest things with COVID was how do we feed our kids? Because some of our kids, this is the only place they eat.
That was one of the very first episodes we did. We started this podcast kind of at the very beginning of COVID, and we talked all about the
timing.
I don't know why we did that, but we were like, oh, nothing else to do. Might as well start a podcast.
Did you guys deliver meals? We delivered meals.
We did a little bit of everything. We partnered up with a local food pantry. We offered pickups for 2 meals a day and a snack for like a week at a time where parents could come and pick it up. We also had some bus drivers who drove routes to deliver food. It really just kind of shifted as we kept realizing that we were stuck in this. Too. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of kept like snowballing into like a more,
Well, first, right, we thought it was going to be like a couple weeks, and then it was like a year later. We're still like doing those things. Yeah. So that's what we had too. A lot of our families, some of the schools like bought coolers for them. A lot of our houses are really hard to get to on the reservation. And there's a lot of non-addresses. So to try to find people, and we have like transient students and a lot of homeless students. So that was like really, really, really difficult. But, everybody, like we all did all across the country, we made it work in some way. So, but that was the huge thing. And again, I started talking and forgot what my original question was. Was it funding?
Yeah. We talking about funding. Okay. No, you're good.
So kids could apply to go here. That isn't really something that we see very often, is that a bunch of kids from the local communities want to come to a reservation school. Sure. That's not really a thing. We do have kids from the reservation who go into the city, into the public schools there. So they have a small Native American population in their schools, but they're not considered Native American schools.
Does your reservation have like different school districts, or is it like you were
Yes,
talking about like the other school? Is that like
our
an own
reservation is
separate?
huge.
Okay.
I'd have to look up, but
No, that's fine.
it's huge.
I was just trying to get an
land
idea.
mass. It's huge.
Okay.
So yeah, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe 4 different school districts on the reservation.
Okay.
So yeah, so kids are in different areas. Like now it's so funny. Like I'm on the other side of the res now, where I used to know all the kids on the other side. Now I'm on the opposite side of the res. So it's a whole different like community. Plus we have 2 tribes that live on our reservation. We have the Eastern Shoshone tribe and then the Northern Arapaho tribe. And sometimes they don't get along.
Okay.
So, because, as a government, that's what we did. We're like, hey, do you not like each other? Let's put you on the reservation together. And so one side of the reservation is more Shoshone and the other side of the reservation is more Arapaho. All of my children are both.
Really?
So they are all, and that's very, very common out here. So Shoshone and Arapaho kids, my kids are all enrolled Shoshone, but their other parents are Arapaho. So, yeah.
I was wondering if you and I mean, like, I know a lot of times, like, you're talking about, like, they would have completely different institutions. So I was curious.
Yeah. So that's kind of what it is. So on one side of the reservation, there's the Shoshone schools, not officially, but that's kind of what it is. And then on the other side, there's the Arapaho schools. And Arapahos are bigger. There's more Arapaho on the reservation than there are Shoshone. So there's almost 3 schools that are more Arapaho. And then if you're Shoshone and you go to the Arapaho school, it's kind of a thing and you don't want to tell people, or vice versa. It's like
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So my kids are like Shoshone in an Arapaho school. So they're like, shh, just you're Arapaho. So
that's a whole
and not
other
everyone is like that, but it's a weird little, it's a little thing. So yeah, they're very proud of their heritage and their tribes. And so that's part of it that goes along with it.
Gosh. Just other social things you never would have to consider, like.
Yeah.
What does it look like for inter-district athletic events and social events and stuff like that? I mean, is there like interaction with public schools in the area? Are there leagues out there? Everybody's just all in the same sports leagues and stuff?
Yeah. So basketball is huge here. There's been documentaries about, Native American basketball. So that's huge. But they play against each other and then they play off reservation around the state. Yeah. And then that's where they face racism.
Yeah.
When they leave the confines of the reservation and they go out. And that was one of the things that at the school that I first worked at when I came to Wyoming, that was my husband and I, one of the first things we noticed at our school playing basketball against a Native American school when we didn't even know what that meant. We just saw things that we were like, ooh, this is not okay. This is not okay. And it happens regularly. And that's the sad part for our kids, like trying to protect them from that, but also wanting them to go out into the world. And sadly, if they left the state, I don't think they would face the same kind of racism because, like, think about it. If people came to Ohio, we don't even grasp what it means to be Native American. So, like, it's a very, very different exposure. Yeah. They don't like to leave the reservation.
Well, and why would they?
No.
I mean, when you describe these things, it's like, well, of course they want to stay.
We all do, right? That's what we want. Like, we want to be where we're accepted and we don't feel different. Yeah. So even the kids talk about just shopping, in the local community, that a lot of times they feel like people watch them and that they're targeted. And, that's literally 2 miles away from like where we are. But the things that happen on the reservation, the outside world doesn't hear about unless you work there.
Come into it.
And, I come into it and I hear about it and I know people and my friends are here and, those kinds of things. But people in the community don't hear those kinds of things. They think like if you watch, I don't know, if you watch Dances with Wolves, that you get the whole
you get it.
American experience, and it's just not. Yeah. all white women aren't stands with a fist, and it's not, that kind of thing. So
Right.
I tell people to watch Wind River, which is
Mm.
actually the movie made about our reservation, but it's fictionalized. So
Really?
it's got Jeremy Renner.
I've heard of it.
And it kind of deals with MMIW, but it's a really good movie, and it sadly, and the people here love it too. It's gives a
Really?
really accurate depiction of what it is to live on the reservation.
That says a lot then. If
Yeah, the things that face. They love that movie, and they love Revenant.
Oh yeah.
If you watch The Revenant, which is more historical, but Wind River is a more modern story.
Well, I have a question then, kind of piggybacking off of this.
Yeah.
I want your hot take. Sherman Alexie, yes or no?
I still say yes. I still think there's value.
Okay.
I it's a weird thing. So I'm in this teaching hard history course right now, and we talk about this all the time. And my question last week was like what you're bringing up. When does what someone does take away the value of the good things that they have done?
Mm-hmm.
And so in some cases, and even so, you as a Holocaust educator, I've had that conversation with my kids over the years. Like, okay, it's easy to villainize people. It's easy to say, look at so-and-so, they're the devil, this is evil. Look at Hitler, what a terrible person. And then you have to tell them that's not how Hitler rallied the masses.
Mm-hmm.
It was by being personable, by being flamboyant, by being charismatic, he was an artist, and the people who loved him. Mm-hmm. So I tell that to the kids, like it's a scary thing when you start saying the other. And so, so I wrestle with that question. Like, I love Sherman Alexie's books.
Mm-hmm.
I love them. That doesn't mean that I'm okay with what he did.
Sure.
But I think that the value of our students reading things where they see themselves is a good thing. Diary of a Part-Time Indian.
Yeah.
And my kids don't get to see very many books where they are the main character. Like Reservation Dogs is huge because of that, right?
That's
Reservation Dogs is like amazing because kids see themselves and their lives, and it's not a joke, right? It's not a caricature. It's who they really are. So what do you say about Sherman Alexie?
Well, I taught him last year to my general English class.
Which one?
The part-time.
Diary of a Part-Time Indian? Okay.
They loved it. We had such great conversations. We love talking about basketball, like all the things that you're talking about, right? Like the generational, like with grandma, and like it's like everything that you're
even
describing.
The white teacher, right? Who has white guilt.
Yes.
Like he's there. Yes.
And he goes off the reservation to get an education, and he gets treated as other. Like all the things that you're talking about are like exactly his story. Which is kind of validating it for me in some ways. This isn't on you, but like it's kind of making it all the more relevant because I had nothing to hold it to, like other than itself.
Yeah.
But of course I know that like he's a messy person. He has committed these things. But my kids
we're all messy people.
It. Yeah.
We're all messy people. That's what I tell my kids all the time. We're all messy. I like to talk about the history of Dr. King. I'm like, he cheated on his wife, guys. He wasn't wholly good, but he did wholly good things. So that's like, true. I don't know. Sorry. That's my,
no, I mean,
I do. I wrestle.
That's the kind of voice that I'm like looking for, obviously, as a high school English teacher is like, and as you know, from your experience of teaching the Holocaust, like important histories are taught from the perspective of people who lived them, not a retelling or by someone, like, so that's the thing. Like in my head, I was like teaching Sherman Alexie. I'm like, this is close to, these places.
It is. And it's a voice. Have you read, so here's another, if you're conflicted about that, They're There by Tommy Orange. Have you read that? Okay. Pick that one up.
Okay.
There isn't the stigma surrounding that author. He's a newer author. Beautiful book about modern Native Americans.
All right.
Centered on, and Sherman Alexie's is too, but it is like a dated book at this point. But centered around several families attending a powwow in Oakland and all those same things that he deals with at a younger level for kind of older kids.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful novel. It's a beautiful novel. But so if you want to like go, I don't even want to talk about that. Right. We'll read this one instead.
No. Yeah. I mean, my kids love Sherman Alexie, like they love his voice.
Definitely.
It's
But
so
my kids
fun.
also don't always want to read Native literature.
Sure.
And that's one of the things, Wyoming has that Native Education for All that got passed, where we teach Native American history in all of our classes. And I've heard over and over, you can't teach other things here. And I'm like, why can't I? Now, there are things I choose not to teach anymore. I don't teach The Great Gatsby because how can they bridge that gap between this extravagant opulence that I can't even, grasp? And I love Gatsby, but teenage voices are teenage voices. And we talk about that all the time. That's why the Catcher in the Rye is still relevant, right? Because Holt Caulfield is still a jerk, and he's growing up, and he's
so annoying.
Teenage angst and all of this stuff, but they all live it. They're all the same, and they all think he's funny when they start getting him. And I'm teaching Speak here this year. I'm teaching.
I was
Speak.
about to ask if you taught Lori.
I still love Speak, and especially with our girls here who have faced sexual assault in some way, I think it's an important book to start with. So I started with my freshmen. I'm doing Of Mice and Men. I'm doing The Outsiders. Oh, and The Pearl. I'm doing Steinbeck's The Pearl with my seniors, which is also, though, and I taught it never thinking when I was teaching white kids that it's about Indigenous people. So we're having that conversation like on it too, but it's Latino, Indigenous.
So there's some
communities.
like classic literature still mixed in.
Yeah. So, and they're enjoying it. So I'm like, I've heard over and over, like, you can't teach a whole novel. The kids don't have the attention span for it or whatever, but we read together every day. I don't say go sit in a corner and read it. We read it together.
Yeah. It sounds like you're even in your day-to-day, because you've talked about a couple of different assumptions that people make about what you can or can't do in your classroom or, in your school system. What are some of those, just more of those bigger misconceptions or things that you'd want to address about perceptions or, perceived or real differences? What would you sort of want someone to know if you had a microphone and a soapbox for a minute?
Well, the one is what I talked about before, that like there are quality teachers on the reservation. Many of the people that I've worked with are some of the best teachers I've ever seen. Because to me, my measure is how well do you relate to kids and can you engage them? And so I see that all the time. And I even hear recently, like, was working with someone and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's such a curmudgeon. Like, he's so unpleasant to be around. Like, these kids are going to hate him. And then I sat in a room with him one day and watched him with kids. And I was like, newfound respect. He doesn't have to get along with me. He's great with these kids. So, like that kind of thing. I think that, like, it's important to recognize, especially my kids here, that they're human beings before they're Native American, that they're kids and they just want to be seen as individuals instead of carrying this burden for every Native American in the country. And what is your Native American experience? And I guess like my feeling is that too, because, I have 2 children who are Black who have carried that burden as well. Like, they're supposed to answer for every Black person that kids have never met in Wyoming, all of those questions. And I think, yeah, that's my most important thing, is that first they're kids and that their struggles, while we look at it as something as a whole for reservations, for communities, for schools, their struggles are so personal to every one of them. And it doesn't matter how many times we see the same thing over and over and over. It's them experiencing it. And I think like just having kindness in that and recognizing people for their humanity. But I guess I feel like that across the board, like that we should always be greeting each other as humans, having an experience before we judge people for everything else. So, yeah. And I will tell you this too, that the Native American community is incredibly accepting of a lot of things that are not accepted outside the boundaries of the reservation. And that is something that I wish the rest of our country could learn from as well.
I'm just still struck by what you said, just like so much ignorance being at play here. I mean, even for adults, I mean, even our parents, we've had conversations with, recently about this because I was talking with my dad about this. And
your cringy moments with your
well,
parents?
it wasn't it wasn't cringy exactly, but
We all have them.
No, we were talking about racism, and I was kind of pushing back on some things and just asking questions here and there. But he traveled somewhere in the South, and I don't exactly know where. I think it was maybe South Carolina. He was somewhere, and I don't even know the nature of what it was that he witnessed, but he witnessed some sort of horribly overt racism happening at a gas station. And the way he described it to me, it surprised him. Like he was caught off guard by it. And for me, I've lived, now in New York City. I've lived in places other than rural, white, small town Ohio. So I've been, around people who don't look like me. He really hasn't ever lived anywhere other than small town southeastern Ohio. And so I was just kind of struck by the fact that it was extraordinary to him, because I'm like, it's not really that I'd fault you for expressing it that way or feeling that way, because to you it really is extraordinary to see something like that. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening right next to you all the time, because this community that you're in, you might, as a passerby, have seen something blatant that just the fact that you were out of town or allowed you to see, but that is exactly what's going on around you all the time. But for a collection of, socioeconomic and cultural reasons, you don't see it. So, but even just like a basic level of exposure to difference and to people who are different from you and who come from different backgrounds, like I think that we're doing a lot of people a disservice. I mean, maybe the educational system just isn't built to tackle this kind of stuff. Right? I mean, I say it's certainly not right now. The public school system in America, at least, is not designed to deal with those kinds of challenges. But it's truly just, you don't even know what you don't know. So,
and how do you deal with that when you have kids, when you're exposing them to things in school, and they go home to families that say racism no longer exists?
Yeah.
That's not a thing. Or, I mean, how often I've heard so many people say that. Well, that's not really even a thing, is it? Oh, it is.
Oh, yeah.
But, but I think that's what makes our job as teachers so much more important too, is because, so when I taught in Southeastern Ohio, it's a major red state, right? Even more so now than when I was there.
Yeah.
But I taught in a red school, for lack of a better term of it. And everyone says, don't talk politics at school. Don't talk politics in school. I always taught politics. I always talked about, that's my opinion. I want you to have your opinion, and I want you to feel free to express your opinion, because that's how we communicate as people. But I thought it was important to my kids to see that not everybody is like them, and not everybody is like their parents. And so we would have that conversation a lot, because when kids would say, you're a Democrat? What?
What a horrible thing.
And I would say, oh, but you like me, right? Well, yeah, but okay, we'll see. We can like each other.
Wasn't that bad?
Not, yeah. And like some of my students, like, especially, I mean, I'm friends, like now friends, because they're adults, with so many of my old students from Ohio. And especially like my first year of teaching, where, you just gather them in and you love them. And
those are your babies.
Yeah. But they're like, in their 30s now. And like, we have good conversations, and a lot of us are politically different, but we have great admiration and respect for each other. And our country's lost that somewhere along the way. But I just think it's important for kids, because they might not hear that at home. They might only hear that Republicans are all bad, Democrats are all bad, all of these things. But when when they greet you as a human, and they meet you as a human and decide they like you, that changes your perception. And I, over the years, have had so many kids say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had you as my teacher, because I learned this because you talked about things that I didn't hear. And not that I'm like going into schools wanting to convert kids, but it's really nice to know that you expose them to something and change their lives in some ways because of that. Like that's the best thing as a teacher, right? To know that you've had that kind of impact on kids. So.
All right. So, Katie, you have an important question in here as we get to the end of our time. Would you like, it seems important to you that you be able to ask this one. So I wanted to give you.
I want Heather to say on the record what her favorite Dave Matthews song is.
Okay. So my favorite And there's so many because he's a poet and everything speaks to me and I cry
Mhm.
at his concerts.
Poet.
My soul, my
Mhm.
soul is drenched in Dave's words. But Two Step is my favorite. And Two Step at Folsom Field because there's always a different intro. And
Mm.
so the intro at Folsom Field is the one that speaks to my soul. So
Were you there for that one?
So I love no, not at Folsom Field. That was, I
Mm.
think, before I was even a fan.
Really?
My husband and I started dating because of Crash. So we were in college together. My husband's a lot younger than me. So I was a late in life college student. I mentioned that I liked this song by Dave Matthews.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, oh my God. And then he burned so this is back burning CDs day.
Mhm.
Burned like 9 CDs for me. We went on a date.
Mhm.
We had a discussion about if Crash was a love song or an F me song.
Oh.
And I said it was a F me because you love me song.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
best of both
And
worlds.
then 2019, we renewed our vows at the Dave Matthews Gorge.
So cool.
So, yeah. And so 21 years later, we're still loving Dave. And so what is your favorite, Katie?
Mine
Have you
has to
switched
be.
over from Coldplay? Are you now more Dave than Coldplay?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I'm still going to have to revert back to Coldplay, but I do love Satellite. That's my favorite Dave song by far. It's so pretty.
Beautiful.
It's
It is.
different.
And the music is so beautiful.
Mhm.
I also love Samurai Cop because it makes me think of my granddaughter now. So I always say
Oh.
that's her song, Oh Joy Begin. So like when she was born. But
Mhm.
my favorite Coldplay song is The Scientist. So
Oh,
just so you know.
that's
And
a
it
good one.
it makes me cry almost every time.
Yeah. I think my favorite Coldplay, they redid Johnny Cash's. Is it Till Kingdom Come? Was that Johnny Cash originally?
Oh, I've not even heard that song. I was not okay. Blasphemy, I know. Not a huge Johnny Cash fan.
Now we're gonna hang
So,
up on you.
Yeah. So I love Dolly Parton, but I was not a country music fan. So yeah. Anyway. Don't
But I
beat me.
think my actual favorite Coldplay is probably Shiver.
Oh, that is a good one. That is a good one.
Always a good
Oh,
one.
I do know that one, even though I'm not as big of a Coldplay fan as you.
That's okay. We still
yeah.
love you. Okay.
I'm getting a
Last
music
bit.
education here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what it was like when I was in Heather's classroom.
Uh-huh.
We didn't talk about English.
A lot of music. All right, so our last bit, we always share something we've learned recently. So Heather, you can go last, so you have a chance to conjure up whatever.
Well, we want to end on the strongest note is what we really want to do there. So yes, you have to be last. Sorry, it's the only option. Okay. Yeah, I will go first. I work in technology. We were talking about before the show. I work big part of my work is working in virtual reality and working for I work with making VR games that are built to help people recover from shoulder injuries and shoulder strength building and stuff. So physical therapy with VR. Long story short, last week was the Meta's big event. So Meta being the company that is now what we call the owners of previously Oculus. I just think the name change is so confusing and bad. But anyway, Meta and Mark Zuckerberg were talking about the future of Meta's attempt at building a metaverse. And the thing that I learned was that everybody was very up in arms about legs because these avatars in VR are not historically known to be able to have legs.
It's so weird.
Well, it's just because of the lack of sensors on these VR devices to track your body below a certain place. Right?
They didn't just give everybody legs automatically.
Well, the thing is you can move in your actual physical space. And then what happens to your avatar in VR if you move in physical space? It just floats kind of like a Jetsons robot across the floor without legs. So there's this big...
Call me Rosie.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There was a big to-do because Mark Zuckerberg announced that avatars would finally be getting legs, and everyone was like, oh, yay, legs. And he gave us a little demo or whatever. But then it turned out that the demo was just basically using motion tracking. So it wasn't really the headset interpolating where the legs should be. It was just an animation that they put together for the demo of the show. Okay. So even the legs that he said were coming were not, it still doesn't have legs.
They were fake legs. Still fake legs.
Still no legs.
Yes.
No legs to this VR world. So that's what I learned.
Episode of Black Mirror yet.
Yep. That was what I spent way too many minutes last week thinking about legs in VR. So, Katie, what did you learn?
My I teach a dual enrollment course through a local university, and so my seniors are doing classification essays, and one of them is doing the classifications of soup. So like broth, stock, all of those things. Didn't know they could write that much or research that much, but
Soup.
if you've ever wondered who invented condensed soup, it was MIT.
Huh.
And I just don't think there are enough t-shirts at MIT to kind of, that should be like part of the tagline.
Encapsulate soup.
Yeah,
MIT,
like
birthplace of soup.
why weren't we celebrating that sooner? So it was MIT. All right, Heather, what did you learn?
Yours are funny.
That's okay.
Mine isn't funny. My thing that I was thinking about a lot this week, because I have a horrible temper. But I guess I've just been trying to teach myself this week to have grace. And that's grace with other people and grace with myself, because as much as I rage at other people, I rage at myself as well. So yeah, mine is just good. Our world would be a better place if we all just held some grace for each other, I think. Mostly us.
Yeah, that's way better than ours. So much better than
I like soup.
I like soup.
Well, I'm working on
myself.
I like both of those things.
I love legs. I love soup.
The legs are great. Soup is great.
Yeah. That's like, what is that? Anchorman? I love lamp.
Yeah.
I love legs.
Brick.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself.
Well, Heather, is there anything else you want to say? Is there anything we can plug for you? Do you have like a Donors Choose we can like?
You can always look for me on Donors Choose for Arapahoe Charter High School in Arapahoe, Wyoming. So I always have some type of project going for my kids. So
do you have like a profile on there that we can share?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll find it.
I can find it and send it to you or something too. But
yeah, we'll put it with it.
I'm always looking for ways to bring things into the kids. So
awesome.
Yeah.
We'll post
and
it in our show
notes. This was so fun. Thank you.
This has been so great.
This was a good time.
Thank you so
Sorry
much.
I talk so much. I have a tendency to do that.
That's exactly what we wanted to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining us.
So great. It's so good to see you. This is such a.
It was good to see you guys too. I'm all warm and fuzzy.
It's just been
now.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll chat soon.
Great.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye.
Listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.